they suck and I hate them and they adore me too much, so I'm just going to leave.
With like a Scooby-Doo wrench to the back of the head.
And it ties in with the whole idea of creating life.
Probably one of the best things that he did in the series.
That passivity would continue even with godlike powers.
Never tell me the odds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
They ran out of mustard and biscuits for him.
Whoa!
Aha.
Flashbacks.
Flashbacks.
Stupid.
That's for all the raises I never got.
Wrap up this, wrap up that. Okay, done, and everyone's dead. Thank you, bye.
Broadcasting live from inside the power band. Actually, broadcasting live from way outside the power band. This is The Blah. In this episode, everybody dies. I'm your host, good old Mulvey, along with my intrepid companion, firing on one cylinder and using the improbability drive, Jarhigo.
Yo.
And the heavily shredded algorithm.
What's up? I've been lifting weights.
Yeah.
You swole, bro.
I'm so swole.
Folks, this week on the podcast, we've got something very exciting for you. We will be talking about the second half of the first season of the Watchmen reboot, continuation, whatever you want to call it. And we've got some interesting things to talk about. I'm excited.
I'm especially excited to hear Benny's frustrations.
I am also very excited to hear that. Where do we want to start? Algorithm, you want to give us a blowback, blow-by-blow of the first half for the folks at home?
Yeah, I'll give you a blowy. The last episode we did on the Watchmen, we kind of went on a major diatribe about the race war element of the show. So if you want to hear more about that, check that out. Covered the cast in pretty great detail and then went through the first 4 episodes. And it turns out it was a good place to kind of have that episode because the series really kicks off in episodes 5 onwards. So
absolutely.
We speculated a bit and chatted in general about the show. And we will conclude this evening.
Very nice recap.
Thanks. I was practicing all day.
Nice.
High level, what do you guys think? Season's over. Benny, shit all over this thing.
Yeah, shit all over it, man. What do you got?
Well, first off, I'm not going to shit all over it.
Shit all over it, Benny.
There were things that I liked about it, and I was definitely hopeful, I think, in the first half of this material. The first half of this show that came out, I was hopeful about it. But I just feel like the way it was wrapped up was kind of jankety. Personally, like maybe they might have been going for a little bit too broad of a scope here, too many eras of time, too much happening. So my criticisms revolve around there and the treatment of certain characters, I think.
Do you want to dig into it a bit, or do you want to dig into it as we go through the episodes?
I can dig into it now if you want.
Give it a whirl, man.
And then we can decide there. Yeah, I'll give it a whirl because this is gonna be jankety as fuck.
Like the show.
Just like the show.
All right. Maybe I'll start off with some things that I like first so that it doesn't seem like I am shitting all over this show because it does have a lot of redeeming qualities, and I think we talked a lot about this stuff in the first half of this, but the cast is stellar. The acting is great. The music is fantastic. The look of it is fantastic. Very high quality production, and I don't want to take anything away from anybody who was involved in this. I just think the writing got a little sloppy towards the final act there, and I was just disappointed to see the way things played out. I got really excited for a minute there, and then I was like, yeah, okay. So I guess there's some spoilers here, but it felt like Manhattan was kind of one-dimensional in this. It felt like it was a major departure from where we left him at the end of the last story, and it just seemed kind of bizarre to me. And maybe there's something that I missed, so maybe you can help me here. But just the way he comes back into the story. I mean, all right, so where do we start? At the end of the original series of comics, he leaves because he's no longer really identifying with the human race, and he wants to go off and be by himself and perhaps create life, right?
Yeah, partially because Veidt convinced him he's carcinogenic and is responsible for the death of his original girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. Yeah,
okay. So I don't really see anything that would have happened to change his mind about that in this series.
Yeah.
And I just thought him going off to, what moon of Jupiter were they supposed to be on?
It was Europa.
Europa, okay. So him going off to Europa and, I don't know, remaking the couple that he walked in on when he was a little kid that gave him a Bible. And it's literally just clones of them and clones of them that apparently bubble up from the bottom of a pond or something. Like, and then he leaves there because he's tired of their adoration. And he sends Veidt there, which is fine. I didn't have a problem with that. And then he goes back and he just finds Angela Abar out of nowhere, seemingly. He never had any previous relationship with her. Like every other person, every other woman he had been with, he had had a previous relationship with. You know, I mean, it wasn't like he just found these girls out of thin air because in the future, he knew he was with them. And that's how it seemed like he got together with Angela Abar. And then just his resignation. But he seems to just, I don't know, like, you know, he comes back and he doesn't do anything. He just seems completely resigned to die.
Yeah.
It seemed like he had a lot more at his disposal there. So it felt like they were using Manhattan as like a MacGuffin, essentially. Like they were just using him as a plot device. And I just thought that was odd to use, you know, a character that's pretty well loved in such a shallow, I don't know, manner. Like everything about the way it wrapped up just seemed I don't know. It just seemed jankety to me. I felt like it was a little on the quick side, the way they wrapped it up.
Yeah, that's something I definitely will agree with.
For certain. It was rather unceremonious what happened to Lady True. I thought that was a really interesting character.
Yes, I agree with that.
They just kind of like dropped that ball in a very unceremonious way. What else? I thought it was stupid that they arrested Adrian Veidt.
With like a Scooby-Doo wrench to the back of the head.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like, exactly. And this guy is supposed to be like the smartest, you know, like he's seen all these other things coming. Like he wouldn't see that coming, you know, I don't know. There are a lot of little things that ended up bugging me about this. And it's weird because it didn't at first, but there was, when I finished the series, there was like a, you know, something was bothering me and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And I think it revolves around those particular points. And there's probably more that I'm forgetting here, but you know, and it's too bad because I almost think they should have gone with a prequel and made the whole thing about like the Hooded Justice arc, because I thought that was really compelling stuff. And I think that would have made a way more interesting story. Instead, they did this like decade spanning thing and they wrote an entire episode where they invented a drug to send Angela Abar back in time so she can see what happened. Like, you know what I mean? There just seemed like there was a lot of like kind of hand wavy shit in there, in my opinion, that move things around. And I don't know. I just didn't find the way it wrapped up to be satisfying at all.
Wow, man. Really, really interesting thoughts, Ben.
Yeah, I can't shit talk any of it, really.
I can't either, man.
I totally see where you're coming from. I tend to feel differently about each of those points, but I totally see where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I'll leave it there for now. And if anything else comes back to me, or if I have an opportunity to flesh things out a little more along the way, then I'll jab in.
Yeah, totally. Where were you at high level, Kev?
I mean, my first thought was mind blown. Like, I couldn't not believe what they did with this story. I was just blown away by Manhattan coming back into the picture. I don't remember which one of you said it, but when we did the first episode, one of you mentioned your theory was that he was on a prison on Mars.
Yeah, it was Bene.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That was Veidt. I thought Veidt was in a prison.
Exactly, yeah. You thought Veidt was in a prison on Mars, and you were pretty much spot on, man. Like, this is exactly what he did, which I thought was very cool of the episode and of you. I thought that, I'm trying not to let what Ben just said get in the way of what I first thought, because I really think what you just said is totally legit. But I was really impressed. I really liked the way that they reintroduced, they brought Manhattan back into the fold. I really enjoyed the episode with when she took the entire bottle of nostalgia and we got to see this really great, like, entire episode that was like a period piece exploring really her own origins, or sort of the pregame to her origins, and Hooded Justice and that whole thing, and how interesting that was, because I always thought Hooded Justice was a white man, and it turns out that he's not. And I thought that was incredibly interesting.
Super clever.
Yeah, it was really cool to see all that stuff. I really enjoyed that. I believe that was episode 6.
Yep.
Yeah, if I can
go for it.
Jump in really quick just with a thought on that. I didn't like the way they made that episode. Like, I thought taking the nostalgia pill thing, it just seemed like they really invented that to move the story forward or to include it. And that bothered me because as I said before, I thought the Hooded Justice portion was some of the more interesting stuff in this.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling you, man. I could make a strong case that Episode 6, the Hooded Justice episode, is the best episode out of the latter half and possibly the entire run. It was really well done.
Yeah, I thought for sure you were going to argue that 6 was the best of the bunch.
Yeah, but I mean, I really see what Ben's saying. Like, it was a convenient plot device to invent a drug. Like, I see both sides of it very easily. Like, it was a convenient plot device to invent a drug to send her back so we could get that backstory. But at the same time, I could see very easily in this alternate reality world that they live in, somebody creating a drug like that for people to do exactly that. And then, for it to be taken off the market and all of that sort of thing.
I think some of the points that I might differ on, of which this is one, is like, I kind of viewed Manhattan through the lens of the God Emperor of Dune from the Dune series, where like they were trapped in their own futures, so to speak. And so the fact that Manhattan is passive, I thought prior to reading interviews with David Lindelof, I thought was kind of similar to how the main characters in the Dune series kind of felt trapped by their ability to see the future. And so it didn't really bother me as much because I'm a huge fan of the Dune stuff. So I kind of probably just like pieced together that in my head as kind of justification. And then similarly, the, nostalgia drug would be, compatible with the spice awakening of the Bene Gesserit in the same Dune universe where they kind of like can go through each other's pasts and stuff. So I think I had less aversion to it because I just attached it to some other stuff that I was already familiar with in other universes, I guess, which doesn't justify it, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was like taking inspiration from the Dune universe with those kind of things. So it's not to say that Ben, it's not to say that your opinion is right or wrong or anything other than just your opinion, but I think I took it from that perspective, and so I had less of an issue, but I understand where you're coming from.
That's fair, but to me it just seemed ultimately his inclusion was just to be there for somebody to try and steal his power. There's the whole red herring. There's a whole red herring of the white supremacist thing, which I don't know. After that, that whole plot line just seemed like
just fizzled. Yeah,
it just seemed like why the fuck did they even include it in the first place? And then for Lady True to be trying to take his power ultimately is the whole thing. But that thing of somebody trying to steal his power seemed like the major reason that he was there.
Yeah,
not for him to have any kind of satisfying character arc in the thing. Because he is just completely passive through the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, you could also argue that his purpose in being there was to be a major marker in Angela Abar's story that led to her becoming Dr. Manhattan, So like my understanding based on some interviews with Lindelof is that the whole story is meant to be revolving around Angela Abar's origin story, part one of which is her origin as an orphan in Vietnam, and part two of which is basically the conclusion of this series. So like he's just there to be a formative element of Angela Abar's story as opposed to his own character. So you're right in a sense, but it sounds as though it was fully intentional as opposed to like a mistake on the writer's part.
Okay, based on what you both just said, I could argue that Dr. Manhattan's purpose was ultimately to pass on his power. And it ties in with the whole idea of creating life. So he went to Europa and he created life, essentially. And a quick aside is, yes, I think the Bible thing was really weird. Like, I would think that somebody like him existing as Dr. Manhattan, who can exist everywhere at one time and had so much experience being a being with that kind of power, would not have some weird attachment to Adam and Eve in the Bible. So from that perspective, I definitely see where Ben is coming from, and I agree. But at the same time, the whole idea of the egg, the chicken and the egg, creating life on Europa, and then essentially leaving his power in an actual egg for somebody else to take and then become him, like, I think that was why he was there, was to pass that power on to somebody else. and somebody that was worthy of handling and taking that power. So from that angle, I don't really think it's pointless at all. Like, that was his whole point. He could see everything. He was existing in all of those timelines at the same time. And ultimately his goal and his purpose there was to infuse that egg with his essence so he could pass on his powers. And we see that from the beginning when they're meeting in the cafe. And another quick aside is, I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like they did explain why he chose her in that episode when they're sitting at the bar having the beer. And I can't remember it well enough to remember what the reason is, if there is one.
As far as I remember, the whole causal relationship came from the future. I don't think he had a relationship with her beforehand. He just kept going on about how, like, this has already happened, like, you don't understand the way I view time. And I get that, but I get the way, I mean, we see time as an arrow. It has a past and a future, which isn't actually what the nature of time really is like. It's just how we perceive it. So Manhattan sees everything as happening at once, which I understand. But it just, like, he's never had a motivation come from the future before, as far as I understand.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
So that whole thing just seemed like they could have done something a little more to, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a super legit whole where, unlike Dune, for example, where emperors in Dune can see the different branches of the future, my understanding is that Dr. Manhattan can only see his timeline. He can only see his past and his future. He can't see anyone else's past or anyone else's future. So by that rationale, walking into a bar and meeting Angela Abar is literally like shooting in the dark to see if she's the person worthy, because until he engages, she is not a part of his past or his future. And once he engages, he could see where it goes. But
right. It flips causality on its head. Yeah. It's kind of odd. It just seemed odd that he would want to get involved with somebody again, given what had happened previously.
Sure, and that's something that I can chime in on based on a bit of reading where David Lindelof said, I hope I might not be saying his name right, but he said,
I think that's right.
He said that he and the other writers, they had huge arguments about Manhattan and what should happen, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that was discussed, and I'll put a link to this interview in the show notes, was like how John Osterman was a very passive person and how that passivity would continue even with godlike powers. And so there's some griping, for example, by Angela's grandfather, Reeves, in one of the final scenes where he says, like, with all that power, he should have done more with it, And I think, like, they chose to travel the path of, like, just because a human becomes a god doesn't mean that human is no longer who they were before they were a god. And so his passivity and desire for love were two major factors psychologically for him as a human. And then they really, informed his decision making even with godlike powers. And so it may be a flimsy justification, but it makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah. See, I always took his going away to be probably one of the best things that he did in the series.
So his going away in the comics, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously a flawed. I don't think there's any arguing that Manhattan was a flawed character, despite all the power that he had. He, seemed to be, his involvement in the Vietnam War seemed sketchy. His non-action on certain things. I mean, there's so much he could have done. I mean, he could have just destroyed the entire nuclear crisis just by zipping away all the nukes. It seems like that would be well within his power. So Hooded Justice was right. There was a lot more that he could have done. And I thought him just resolving to go away was kind of a satisfying way to resolve that, because it seems like he had done more harm than good despite all of his power by the end of the first story. Mm-hmm. So, like, exiling himself seemed like a fitting thing. And for him to come back to hand that power to somebody else.
It seemed unnecessary or just over the top, or what?
Seems completely unnecessary, and it just doesn't seem to fit. If he hasn't managed to do anything good with it after all the time that he's had it, and I know he was a flawed man, and I know he was passive.
Sure, but what's to say?
But what human being isn't?
Yeah.
Right. No, I'm digging what you're saying, Ben, because it's like, if every human being is flawed, right? Whoever got the power is going to have that power with the perspective of a flawed human being. What's to say that they're going to do anything better or different with it? The other thing, too, that I'll say to that is that as John, went through linear time and became more accustomed to being Dr. Manhattan, clearly his perception of humanity and life and the way that the universe works changed. So why was he still acting as a flawed human? Do you know what I mean? Like,
that was another thing, is that I thought the progression of that character was the longer he was Dr. Manhattan, the more removed he was from his humanity, the less able to empathize and identify with other people seemed to be a major arc. And it just, I get that he's a flawed person and that maybe I don't know, it just seemed like he was going in this direction that was an arc that was just setting him up to just go away from humanity completely, So it just seems odd that, it's like, oh, I made my little, I made I made a little paradise spot on Europa, and I built my little, clones of the people that I saw fucking, and they're the new Adam and Eve, but they suck and I hate them and they adore me too much. So I'm just going to leave. I'm going to go find somebody else, I don't know, it just seemed, anyways.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
I took that a little differently, though. Like, I buy what you're selling, but I kind of also buy what the show is selling, in the sense that, like, you take the original comic and, he becomes more and more dissociated as he gains more and more perspective or more power, and leaves through a variety of mechanisms, including Veidt guilting him into it and him feeling disconnected from humanity, which is a huge part of the comic with him and Laurie on Mars and that giant crystal structure. And then, as you say, he leaves. He's gone to create life, which is kind of a passing line in the end of the comic that they fulfill here. And I kind of take it like he's essentially become he's kind of bought into his own mythos of being a god, and he goes and is God and creates Adam and Eve, pulling from, some threads of his childhood of repaying these two people and their generosity. And so in creating life and becoming quote unquote God, he recognizes that it's bullshit, and as a result he realizes he isn't actually a god, he is actually a human, and kind of goes back in the other direction towards being more human-like, and falls back into the human tropes of wanting love and social companionship. And so I kind of can find a way to buy it, in a sense, like it's almost like a full circle thing where he goes from human to God, and then God to broken God, and then he's just like, you know what, fuck it, I want to be a human again, and actually fakes being a human, and for the sake of love, and then like passes on his powers. And so it's buyable, or it's plausible. But I think the opposite of this season would be him suiciding as opposed to going away. Like, if he recognizes that all humans are flawed and no one could really take the power on, then he would just disintegrate himself, I suppose, would be the only alternative to this particular type of thread.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep rebutting, but I'm not going to.
No, sure. I'm not arguing. I guess I'm just talking about it from my perspective.
I just feel like going backwards would require an emotional response to what was going on. And at the end of the first series, it's clear that he's not really having emotional responses anymore.
Exactly.
I feel like maybe he would get sick of what he was doing and decide to move on to something else, but I don't feel like he would have gone backwards.
That's totally fair.
Unless he felt like...
Feel is the operative.
You're right. Unless he was feeling that he had missed something about creation and life in the human element, in the human condition, and that is why he chose to go back and essentially be a regular human, like Superman going into the crystal chamber. Like I need to experience this in its fullest.
And Veidt has the same realization, I think. He goes back too.
I get why they made him the way he was for this story. I just don't think it necessarily fits the character. It's all of this is sort of like, we criticized Rise of Skywalker. And just in general, like where they went with the story after 4, 5, and 6, like an argument could be made that just like, I don't know if that was the right story. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like this is what I'm thinking on overall, like, and it's those little details that make me think that,
Interesting. Yeah, no, I could definitely see that.
I don't know if it was the right story. Like I get I get why they did what they did to push the story forward. I just don't know ultimately if that's how they had to do it. I don't know if I think it's the right story.
And now after listening to you say that, I don't know if it's the right story either. I will say that because I never really finished my meta thought, I guess, at the beginning, like it is a cool story and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like as a fan and as a viewer, I enjoyed the story, episodes 5 through 9. I really did enjoy it. But now looking back at it and talking about it, listening to what you're saying, Ben, I don't know if it was the right story either. I agree.
Yep. For me, high level, I kind of am happy with the story, and I bought into all of it. And there definitely were little bits and bobs that were annoying here and there, but overall, I feel like the movie that Zack Snyder did, in my opinion, is a really good example of what happens when you echo the source material. And I think this is a perfect example of how to elevate source material, from my perspective. I have spoken a few times about enjoying stuff that elevates the original stuff as opposed to regurgitates the original stuff. And so, in last week's episode, we talked about the last of the Skywalker saga and how the new trilogy, in my opinion, just regurgitates the original trilogy. And then in episode 1 of our show, I talked about how Blade Runner 2049 elevated some of the material from the original Blade Runner. So I feel like this is a really great example of elevating the material, regardless of maybe some of the finer points. Like, this is how you make a show about something and pay homage to it, in my opinion. And so I really dug it. I don't think it's like God's gift to television, but it's damn good TV.
No, it's not. It's not The Boys, The Boys, I feel like we all agreed was like just excellent.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Chad. It's not God's gift, but it was definitely good, and it was definitely a solid stab at some very difficult material, because this particular material is held in very high regard by a lot of people, including the three of us. I mean, this graphic novel, I don't know if it was the first, but it was on the New York Times bestseller list, and it might have been the first graphic novel to ever do that, which is a really high achievement and high praise. That said, it is similar to Star Wars in that vein. Like, it's really hard to go at it without, upsetting people. And, I'm certain that Alan Moore was not pleased. He never seemed pleased with the way any of it went. And I understand that completely, but really, really difficult material to tackle. So it's like, how do you go at it, But I definitely dug the idea of, threading the needle from the past to the future, and how the idea of masks carried on. There were times when I was like, the band's going to get back together, but they didn't, and that was fine. And then there were times when I was like, the band's getting back together, but there's going to be some new members, like that's kind of an interesting thought. But again, it didn't happen. And I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in season 2, to be honest with you. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen.
If there is one.
If there is one, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That's another thing is they didn't seem to do much with the masks, with the new generation of masks in this show. I think that was a very satisfying arc. The original story, like, each character has their own arc. It seems less about one person and more about the group. And I thought we were going to see more of that in this. And really, there wasn't any of it. It was something completely different.
Mm.
And it sounds like they were actually thinking about doing something like that, but moved away from it. Like, evidently, the Pirate Jenny was cast in a certain way with a certain actor, and then they minimized her role as such that they felt it disrespected the actor that was originally cast, and so they recast her. So
wow,
it sounds like there actually was a fair bit of team style exposition, but they chose to simplify it down to one character. So you're definitely on the money there, Benny, where it was a could have been.
I mean, looking at it from above, I think that, one of the things that's great about the original Watchmen is the themes that they talk about in society and humanity. And I feel like, or could make a strong argument, that they achieved the same things here. The ideas of race and masks and fear-mongering, and what that drives people to do, and the creation of life and passing things on. I feel like those themes, the sort of overarching themes, were what they tackled in this series. And I thought they did a pretty good job of it for the most part. And I like that, because it gives it more depth than just, a bunch of people throwing on masks as they want to be like the original Watchmen, I like that. I think they did a good, if not decent job of that.
Yeah, it was like the comic was kind of pulpy in the way that it was narrated to a degree by Kovacs/Rorschach, whereas there wasn't really much of a narration to this one. It was way more of a like Lindelof style Lost, kind of jumping between groups and jumping between stories and weaving it all together, which is a bit more of a modern storytelling device. So you could kind of see how that disconnection to the kind of pulpy narration would turn people off as well and make the story seem disjointed versus the other one, which was a lot more team oriented and crisp arcs as opposed to a mishmash of stories. I'm a fan of what they chose to do in this one, but I could definitely see both sides of it.
I am too still. Absolutely. I'm with you 100% there, Chad.
Just circling back to like close out my high level thoughts, like I think the biggest issue that I have with the season is something that you said, Benny, which was that they like kind of rushed the ending. Like they spent so much time building it up to have it all kind of, especially after episode 8, which Dr. Manhattan's date with Angela Abar, like that, in my opinion, is like one of the best hours of television I've ever seen in my life. Like I absolutely loved that episode. And then to have the final episode next, where it was just like, wrap up this, wrap up that, okay, done, and everyone's dead. Thank you, bye. It was quite rushed.
Definitely. Yeah, but you're right, Chad. The 8th episode, which is a god walks into a bar, which is great.
Great title.
The name of that episode. Great title for a great episode. It was really, really good. I like the way they did it. And I don't know, maybe we're not thinking about it enough in the terms of all of the events and time existing at the same time. And maybe there's something we're missing, but I do feel like there were conveniences and they did wrap it a little quickly there at the end.
Yeah. And I think, your comment, Ben, on Lady True being interesting and then just having, a house fall on her like the Wicked Witch, like just kind of didn't make a lot of sense to just discard her Admiral Akbar style.
Yeah. If they were planning on doing a second season, that would have been a great character to.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially because she's Veight's daughter. I mean, like that was a 10-ton hammer hitting you on the head. I never saw that coming.
Yeah. And again, to harp on this interview, Lindelof said he wanted the season to be a self-contained story and didn't want to leave any loose threads and isn't expecting to come back for season 2 and want someone else to do a season 2 if there is one. So maybe had he planned on doing, let's say, a 2-season thing and then leave it, it would have given some breathing room to explore that.
Wow, that's interesting. Thinking about somebody else picking it up and doing season 2 would be sort of weird almost.
Yeah, he was saying like True Detective or the other shows, and like Fargo, I guess, did that too. I haven't really watched all of that yet, but
yeah, but Fargo works as an anthology, and so does True Detective. I've watched seasons 1 and 2 of Fargo. That's excellent stuff.
Yeah,
and features Patrick Wilson, who played Night Owl in the original Watchmen film.
Yeah, right. I just don't see how they can do that with the Watchmen, especially where this leaves off.
No, I don't. I agree with you. I don't think that this material you can do that with. I guess you could do anything, really, and you could do it if you wanted to, but I don't think you should do it with this material. No way.
Chances of success would be low, in my view.
What would 3PO's, odds be for that?
Yeah, exactly.
Never tell me the odds.
There you go.
So do we want to dig in a little bit on this? I feel like we covered the high level pretty well.
Oh, we have.
I mean, I don't know. What else is there to dig into, man? We just sort of dug for like 40 minutes.
You talk about the individual episodes?
Yeah, not in like scene by scene detail, but there's some interesting bits and bobs in there.
Yeah, sure.
I thought episode 5, Looking Glass's origin, where he was, the Jesus freak in a carnival in New York, that was interesting. It was kind of cool to give him that kind of 11-2 PTSD kind of thing, where he has his Looking Glass persona because of the material blocking the
psychic blasts,
psychic blasts and stuff. It was interesting. I liked how they wove that in there. That's all I have to say about that yet.
No, I agree. I like that a lot. That was good. And again, Tim Blake Nelson, great. And again, like as I said in the first Watchmen episode that we did, like all the actors are great in this. Just so good. Like you can say what you want about the material, but they took it and they did, a really good job with it.
Yeah. Yeah, his character arc kind of just peters out to kind of nothing. He gets captured by the 7th Cavalry, and then he just like stands in a corner with a mask on until the end of the show.
Yeah, I didn't dig that because I really thought he was a super interesting character, and I wanted to see more. And then when, you know, this, I think it was episode 6 or 7, when they had, you know, him meeting the girl who was Paula Malcomson, who was in Deadwood and Tombstone, as we talked about before.
Oh, yeah.
I was watching that and I was like, okay, here we go. Now we're going to learn more about Looking Glass. Like, this is going to be cool because I'm a big Tim Blake Nelson fan. And I was like, all right, I want to see this really happen and see this actor get a really good, you know, run here and some really great material and all that sort of thing. And then you're right. It just kind of like they focused on him in that episode, but then he gets captured, kills a bunch of them. And then all of a sudden he shows up at the end in a Rorschach mask and he's like, you know, hey, I'm here.
And he just stands there. I'll do something when I can.
Yeah. It seems like something went wrong there, or like they just decided to go in a different direction. But isn't it a little bizarre that they decided to like give us this background on him and then
go nowhere with it?
And then just, give him such an unsatisfying arc ultimately.
Yeah.
In the series.
I'll tell you what happened, Ben. They ran out of mustard and biscuits for him. And that was what the problem was there.
He just walked off and they just had a stunt double in a mask.
Well, that's kind of how I feel like he was at the end, you know?
Yeah.
Like, she was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, mustard's good on him to me. And you're like, wait, what?
I'll have maybe some of the biggins.
I kind of missed the point of him being there the first watch through, and then I was watching over the last couple days. He's like, I'm here to get something, you know? I'll do something when I can. And on my rewatch, he's basically saying he's there to go and get that evidence of Veidt being responsible for the squid so that when they arrest him Scooby-Doo style, he's got the evidence. And it's just like, it's such a nothing burger of an arc.
Nothing burger is a great way to describe that.
Because like he conquers his PTSD, like that's great and fine, and he ends up with Veidt in the room while they drop the ice squids on True or whatever, and so like there's some closure for him as a character, but it just kind of just doesn't go anywhere.
I agree.
You got any biscuits for sale?
Exactly, man. He's just standing there with the gun, you know. And she's like, "What are you gonna do?" That boy, he's my friend. You know, like nothing, nothing burger. What are you gonna do? Well, I'm old and give out.
You want a few minutes just to go through all that stuff?
I've been going through it all in my head, so I don't need to do that.
You're working out of your system?
I appreciate that. I got it out. I'm good.
Setting the kid with ADD out to run around the house a few times?
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Very, very funny.
Funny.
I see them two boys are bearing down on me. That's it. I'm done. Go.
Just to harp on this interview one last time, there was the questioner was talking to Lindelof about Lady True and was saying, you know, how much more of the backstory for her was written and versus what was on screen. And he was saying that there was like a whole thing that they had similar to like, you know, Looking Glass's episode focusing on him, and they chose to not go down that path. So I feel like there's a lot of material that they just didn't end up using, that they could have probably split the whole thing into 2 seasons maybe and done what we were talking about, but really wanted to keep it contained in 1 season for whatever reason.
Is that true, Chad?
Whoa! Hey!
Hey!
Yes.
Aha.
Join us for Watchmen 2, where bad jokes and bad impressions abound.
Whee.
Good Lord.
Dad puns all the way down.
Next.
Episode 6, Kev, tell me all about how much you loved the Bad Trip episode.
I don't need to like go on a huge thing. I already said it. I just thought it was really well done. I love seeing stuff in black and white. It was great. I mean, maybe it was sort of an overdone trope to do, you know, the flashback in black and white, but I really dug it, man. And I thought it was super cool that like the original Minutemen were inspired by Hooded Justice.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that. Well, I mean, I could. I don't know why. I was, I guess, surprised with the inclusion of Captain Metropolis and Hooded Justice being lovers. I was like, wow, okay. You know, but I thought that was really cool. Like that he inspired sort of really the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, there he was getting justice and vengeance for an entire people who have been slighted for a long time. So I really liked that a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just thought it was well done. How sometimes you would see, Regina King in the scenes, and sometimes it would be, the young Will Reeves or the young Louis Gossett Jr. or whatever. And I just thought it was really well done. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, the first go round for me, like as it's getting going in the first 10 or 15 minutes, I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And then the more I watched it, the more it felt like it was on rails, like a Disney ride first person, which is clearly 100% intentional.
Yeah.
But it kind of pulled me out a bit how much it was on rails because of how, I don't know, unique it was. In terms of just like, yes, it played with the black and white tropes, but it also was like a lot of first person and a lot of, color elements in there and a lot of intercutting and stuff. So it was almost like a Disney ride, but I kind of think that one, it was perfect, like clearly what they were trying to do. And two, it was like a great way to communicate a bad trip, like out of control drug overdose, so it was quite well done.
I totally get what you were saying before about nostalgia, Ben, but at the same time, that is a very comic booky way of doing things, like sort of retro-conning something like that, how many times has that been done in the comics? So if I look at it from that eye, it fits, it's like, all right, we're going to bring this character back to life and here's how it's going to happen. Some people like it, some people don't, but inventing a drug that was originally intended for use with people with degenerative brain disorders, that is now gone totally black market. You can't get it, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool. And from that perspective, it makes sense, that they would do something like that. So, yeah, I don't really have much more to say about that episode. It was just really good.
It reminds me of a couple of gripes that I had were kind of like moments of campiness, which also were clearly intentional. But things like the trapdoor in the floor at Crawford's house where, Laurie drops through the fucking floor, and then like even the Scooby-Doo wrench to Ozymandias' head. Like, I think those are two other examples of very comic booky kind of things. So like they were probably trying to kind of pay a bit of homage to Alan Moore's kind of disemboweling of the comic book industry in the original series. But
Sure.
It just kind of, you're just kind of like, seriously, a trapdoor? Or,
yeah, I know. I thought that was pretty, that was pretty funny.
I think the nostalgia thing is a good example, Ben, where like it is pretty like, huh? But I think, Kev, you make a good point of it being very comic booky. So you can kind of go both ways with it.
Yeah, I know. And I was wondering, now that you mentioned the Scooby-Doo thing, it's like they almost should have pulled Veight's face off at the end and been like, let's see who you really are.
Exactly.
And I would have got away for it too if it wasn't a few kids.
Meddling kids.
What did you guys think of the mesmerism stuff? The hang yourself flashlight strobes and
I liked it. I thought it was cool. It was very total comic booky villain kind of thing, like.
And 1920s-ish, or whatever. I suppose it would have been the 40s or 50s, but
yeah, adding that in to like, get a whole group of people to like destroy themselves. Like I was like, yeah, right on, man. I could totally see that. Yeah.
It's like straight out of like a Batman comic or something.
Totally, man. I liked it. I thought it was really cool. And it also gave him, sort of a larger thread, plot to uncover. He wasn't just out there beating up guys that were robbing flower shops. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You didn't dig it, Benny?
I think I said it before, but this was, I didn't, I have a complaint about the nostalgia thing, but, I get what you're saying, Kev. It is kind of comic booky, I guess. But mainly, I thought this was the most interesting material in the whole thing. Talk about elevating the source material, right? There's so many interesting little additions that they gave to the background of this character that we knew so little about that I thought was tremendous. And I really feel like this is like what they should have gone with. They should have gone with the story of Will Reeves and Hooded Justice, like full depth. I think that would have been a more satisfying story arc, personally.
Well, and playing to your comment about going in a prequel direction, Ben, that would have fit perfectly. Like, let's explore Hooded Justice and the Minutemen.
Yeah, I think they got it right. There was a lot of juicy stuff there. Really interesting stuff. So I don't know. That's all I got to say. What the fuck was up with the elephant?
Yeah, what was up with that? That was super weird. I was not expecting to see an elephant when she walked into that room. Moving on to the next episode, by the way. Perfect segue.
Right, they're leading you to believe that she's going to be... was that in the next episode?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, it was. Okay, sorry. Yeah. All right, well,
yeah,
anyways.
So the next episode was kind of like her. It was her and sort of exploring Lady True's origins and, Angela recovering from the nostalgia and all that. Yeah, right.
It was like flashbacks to her parents dying in the beginning.
Flashbacks. Yeah, what was the up with the elephant? I have no idea. No, that was never explained.
Was that ever explained?
No, it wasn't.
Not to my knowledge.
Stupid.
Totally.
But it was a question asked of Lindelof, and he said all of the information is in the show, and it's not some fancy pants mystery bullshit. It's just kind of like a pun on An Elephant Never Forgets, and Lady True as kind of her spirit animal kind of thing. So I kind of like that instead of Lindelof being like, "There's a deeper mystery," he was like, "No, it's just kind of a bit of fun and." It's a giant source of cerebrospinal fluid for cleansing of the neurotransmitters and da-da-da-da-da.
All right, whatever. I'm not, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get it. I mean, I immediately thought like, oh, elephants have great memories. Like, of course I thought that the second that I saw the elephant, but I don't know, whatever. Unnecessary. And as Ben said, dumb.
Yeah, it's very, very Lost-esque.
Lost-esque? Is that what you said?
Yeah, you just like really weird shit they insert into the story. And you're like, okay, what's that about?
Okay, yeah, let's go here now, totally.
On that episode, the iconography of Manhattan throughout in Vietnam was really interesting to me. Like the orphans painting the Russian nesting dolls of Manhattan, and then like the VV Day or VVN Day or whatever, where everyone dresses up like Manhattan. It was really interesting to me. It kind of reminded me of the Japanese post-apocalyptic media, like Akira and all of the various stuff that was created after the literal apocalypse in Japan when we dropped the nuclear bomb on them. Kind of reminded me of that in a way where, Manhattan comes in as a 150-foot tall god and just decimates the Viet Cong army and wins the war. It's interesting that the society would have kind of a reaction to deify him and kind of their stories about him, etc. It's just clever because it makes sense. The society would totally worship him and hate him, and you'd have the suicide bomby stuff and whatnot. Just the whole Vietnam as the 51st state thing I thought was really interesting.
I thought that was a very interesting inclusion, and I like that because I love what if storylines, alternate history, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I definitely dug that. And just as a quick aside, for anybody that is a fan of alternate history stories, HBO actually released a movie, and it was under HBO Pictures with Rutger Hauer called The Fatherland years ago, back in the 90s, and we will hopefully put a link in the show notes, but it's about an alternate history where Germany and the Axis powers won World War II and what happened to the world in the years following. So,
yeah, right.
Pretty interesting stuff. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Like Man in the High Castle, etc.
Right.
R.I.P. Rutger Hauer.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Wait, he passed away?
Yeah, man, he died last year or earlier this year.
Oh, wow. That's too bad.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Just excellent actor. Yeah.
Incomparable.
Yeah, incomparable, totally.
Circling back, so on this episode, I love the opening Living in America song while they're all like in Saigon. That was really a great use of that song.
And I was trying to figure out where I had seen that, where I had heard that song. And I was like, how do I know this song? And then, of course, once I heard that chorus, I was like, Rocky IV, baby.
And then the episode closes with an instrumental "Life on Mars" by David Bowie, which is fucking amazing as well.
Yeah, agreed. Again, and Ben said in his sort of opening tirade that one thing you absolutely cannot take away from any part of this series is the incredible music, the incredible score by Reznor and
Ross.
What's the guy's name? Atticus Ross. And the utilization of pop culture music mixed in with that was just really well done again. Good job, guys.
Yeah, quick shout out. I didn't realize it, but the music supervisor was a lady named Liza Richardson, and she evidently made all the song selections for the show alongside Atticus Ross's and Reznor's score.
Yes.
Yes, shout out.
Yes, shout out.
Shouting out.
You have been shouted. We have shouted at you.
I thought, just to close that episode out, I thought that Lady True being such a narcissist to clone her own mother and like feed her memories just so she could be present for her victory was so like...
That was so creepy. She was just super creepy. I mean, she wasn't super creepy, but like what she did was super creepy. The whole mom cloning thing and, you know, exactly like what Veidt explains at the end of, you know, she's a narcissist, should never be given power like that. It takes one to know one. So, you know, and I really enjoyed that sort of Adrian had, you know, he wasn't so, he was smart enough to know he was a narcissist and smart enough to, you know, somewhat evolve a bit as a character. And I like that.
Although her meeting with him in the last episode, which we'll get to, I thought was really funny, where he's like, I never gave myself to a woman. And she's just like, oh, is that a painting of Alexander? Yeah, that vault with all of your cum in it. Yeah, that was kind of where I came from, buddy. This is super funny.
Yeah. And replacing the semen with the Jergens lotion was pretty funny too. Anyway, you know, I was not expecting her to haul. Of course, it took me like a minute to figure out what was going on there, and then she like hauls back and puts the injector between her legs. I was like, oh, that's for all the raises I never got.
Right.
I always took extra time cleaning the bowl in your bathroom, and never once did you recognize it, and here's what you're gonna get.
It's so funny. Episode 8, God walks into a bar. So fucking good.
Yeah, really good hour of television chat, as you said before. The way it was all laid out, you know, interspersing the various different events, you know, with the meeting in the bar was great. And, you know, that's definitely a modern storytelling technique. I don't know who popularized it, but Chris Nolan's used it in virtually every film that he's done. And it's a good way to tell a story. It might be becoming somewhat tired at this point, but it was good. I really enjoyed it. I really liked it a lot. It was a really, really good episode. I don't know why one thing I didn't get was why they went out of their way to not show his face through so much of that episode. And then they did show it at the end and in the next episode, and they showed it all the time.
Because he wasn't Cal's face. Like, he would have been, whatever, Billy Crudup's face if it was continuing from the movie.
Oh, right. I know. Man, they really should have got Billy Crudup to come in and do, like, a cameo as that part. That would have been really sweet.
Would have been cool.
Oh, my God, that would have been great. His voice was so perfect as Dr. Manhattan as well. Like, you know, I don't know.
I heard that.
But we don't need to get stuck on that. Anyway, so yeah, really, really great episode. Loved it.
I think the thing that I really appreciated about it, like you said, it's a technique that's been potentially used to death. And if so, I argue that this could be the last hurrah for it. And then, you know, the dialogue is very commonly used in this style, which is kind of a David Fincher style. So, but I love that it like constantly announced what was going to happen and then kept you engaged and surprised you with how it all unfolded. You know, I really like that.
Yes. Yeah, I did too.
Especially like, you know, they're sitting at the bar and she's asking him questions and he's just like, yeah, 6 months from now, you're telling me to leave. And then like later in the episode, that scene happens and she's like, I don't want to fight. And it just, the whole time she's like aware that there's going to be a fight and he's aware there's going to be a fight. And then like the way that the dialogue unfolds that actual fight is just super well crafted.
That idea right there, like what you just said, you know, that's one of the overarching themes, I think, in the series is which comes first, the chicken or the egg? You know, did we have the fight because you planted the idea in my head? Or like, I mean, did you have the fight because you can see the future and you're planting the idea in my head now? Or if you hadn't been able to see the future, would the fight have occurred at all? Like it's like quantum realities. You know what I mean? I really dig that. And the idea of which comes first is over and over again. We see that in certainly the last couple of episodes.
Well, then the ultimate chicken and egg was when she asks who's Judd Crawford to Reeves back in time. And then she's like, oh my God, did I just start this or whatever?
Yeah, I was just about to say that until you stole my thunder and said it.
Stole your thunder, motherfucker.
Totally. Yeah, I know you love to do it too. It's fine, whatever.
It's my favorite thing to do.
Take my thunder and run away.
Laters. How awesome was Ozymandias' Rod Stewart haircut in the middle of the season?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Oh, just like in that episode where they travel, Manhattan travels back in time. He's hanging out with Veidt before he gets the cock ring put in his head, and he's got like the best Rod Stewart haircut I've ever seen. It's like the perfect early '90s haircut.
Oh, right.
I think just seeing Jeremy Irons look like Rod Stewart was a particular pleasure for me.
It was amazing. I loved it. It was epic hair. It was really, really good.
What'd you think of that episode 8?
It was really well done, but again, I just didn't understand what the fuck he was doing there.
Yeah.
The entire reverse causality of his relationship of Manhattan's relationship with Angela Abar is just, I didn't understand his motivation.
Yeah, it is a legit hole. I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it, but
definitely.
So other than that, yeah, great.
It was funny.
So shall we move on to the conclusion?
Yeah, let's move on to the conclusion, rate it, and wrap this up.
Let's do it. I thought the opening kind of sequence with True and Ozymandias in Antarctica was cool. I enjoyed that.
I did too.
It's a shame the remaining 2/3 of the episode kind of was fast forwarded through, but that opening scene was cool.
Definitely. Really, really good.
What'd you think of the Ozymandias and Carbonite thing? That was kind of funny.
Yeah, that was interesting. The whole rocket ship thing. I mean, I don't know. It was... I didn't realize that he had written "Save Me, Daughter." I mean, I think that was intentional, obviously, but yeah, the Ozymandias and Carbonite was pretty cool. Interesting approach to space travel.
And I love how he's just like sitting there in her garden for most of the season, like actually hanging out there like Han Solo.
Is that, I thought that because I remembered seeing that statue, and I was like, when that happened in the final episode, I was like, well, wait, was he just sitting there in the garden for all that time, like until she needed him?
Yeah, actually, what I thought about it was, really, that's how they end Ozymandias? Because of that, like I was like, oh god, all right, fine.
Ozymandias is now a garden gnome.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, all right. I mean, they brought him back, but for a moment there, I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah, it kind of bugged me how he does all these things to help and save humanity, and nobody's ever like patting him on the back for it. It's like, all right, well, we got to arrest you now, or, it's just, I don't know. I thought that was kind of beat.
That's his thing, though, is always wanting the attention and never getting it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very super villainy trope, too. So, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was ever supposed to know that he did it.
Yeah, other than Laurie and Night Owl and Rorschach.
Right. But it was Rorschach's journal was never supposed to get out.
Right. And then there was the confession on the disc that Looking Glass had at the end that President Redford saw.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because it's like everyone kept the secret, but Ozymandias couldn't because he just had to tell everybody what he did.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that we sort of complained enough about the last episode during the course of this entire episode, in as much as we've expressed our displeasure with the way they wrapped everything up. And I agree that now, thinking about it, since you guys were talking about it, especially Ben, I agree that it was wrapped up rather quickly. So I don't think there's much to hang on there.
I've got a couple final tidbits.
Go.
I know that you want to punch me through the microphone, but I'm going to fucking say them anyways.
No, because you always do this. We're always like ready to wrap it up. Then Chad's like, well, I got a couple of other little nuggets we need to talk about. It's only going to take us about 45 minutes.
Number one, I love that the show is completely spoiled by the teaser poster. The teaser poster was the show art of our last episode. It's Sister Night standing there with a blue hue, which I thought was quite clever.
Yeah. It was clever, and I, of course, didn't put it together until the end.
Yeah, same. But it's ballsy and clever. The one thing we touched on last episode, I asked you to remind me to get back to Laurie Blake as to why she would have joined the anti-vigilante squad, and we never got back to it. And just to quickly touch on that, it was kind of my take on it was because she had to keep the secret of Ozymandias being the source of the 3 million deaths in New York. She was like, screw this, screw the vigilantism. I'm going to go and hunt vigilantes. That said, the Peteypedia, which is like a interesting supplemental bit of material that was on HBO's website, talks about how she and Night Owl go on to continue being masked vigilantes after the original graphic novel, and they stop the Timothy McVeigh Oklahoma City bombing and get busted in that sequence. So they stop the Oklahoma City bombing and then get busted, and she makes a plea deal with the FBI, and Night Owl says, "Nah, screw you, I'm not talking." So Night Owl gets a 30-year sentence, and she becomes an anti-vigilante task force. So it's just kind of an interesting little random nugget.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I find it cool and annoying that they put those in there at all, because as you said, because you kept going back to this interview with Damon Lindelof, that, you know, everything's in the story, it's all right there, and it's like, but it's not, because you put in, you know, eight or nine PDFs worth of, you know, file material that has backstory on your version of what would happen after Watchmen ended. So I don't know. It's kind of lame and kind of cool at the same time.
But that's the graphic novels had a bunch of that stuff too, though. Like the back material in all the graphic novels had letters and excerpts from books and stuff. So I think they were trying to pay homage to that. But
yeah, but that was fine because they're the ones that invented the Watchmen series. They can do whatever they want. This is like, you know, tread lightly, and it's like, don't sit there and be like, oh, well, you know, it's all there. And it's like, but it's not all there because you put all this other stuff in there. You know, it's like, why not explore that? And, you know, like Ben was saying, and I think that we both agreed with, like, what about all that material? Why didn't you explore all that stuff? Like, that's clearly some very cool stuff.
Yep. And in keeping with little nuggets that probably shouldn't have been there, it's made pretty clear in the final PDF where Petey, who is the FBI agent that is kind of like a puppy Scrappy Doo to Laurie Blake's.
Right. Who we never see anymore after he's in the bunker, by the way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Petey is the lubed up oil dude from that episode that slides into the storm drain.
What?
Yeah. Final nugget. So he, there's a little bit of him talking about various Caped Crusaders in his various memos, but in the letter that the FBI director sends to everybody saying Pete was fired, they found some like bottles of canola oil on his desk or something. So it's kind of a pretty obvious connection point, but love it or hate it, Petey is lube dude.
I don't like that. Yeah, I don't like, it's stupid. The whole lube dude thing was just, it shouldn't have been in there anyway. You know, like it went nowhere. It was like, it was yet again another like, okay.
Another loose end.
Yeah, another loose end. It had no knot on it.
That's it. That's all my nuggets.
All right, good. Let's rate this thing.
I'll rate it first, just because I tend to do letter grades for TV. So for me, I don't think the show is as good as The Boys, in my opinion, but it's damn close. I gave The Boys a solid A, and I will give The Watchmen a solid A.
Okay. I'm going to go with the letter grade, of course, because it's a series. And I gave The Boys an A or an A+. And I'm going to give this just a solid B. Like, it's really good. The material was definitely a difficult choice to approach, you know, to do a continuation off of, you know, some really, really epic material, i.e. you got some really big shoes to fill. But as Ben pointed out, there's a lot of holes here, and there's a lot of loose ends and a lot of threads that weren't explored, and they wrapped up the end really quickly. So no way on an A. It's a solid B.
Fair enough.
I can't decide whether to give it a B- or a C+. My initial thought was B-, but Kev, since you said B, I feel like I have to bust mine down to a C+.
You should do it.
And really, my only gripe with this is, you know, the loose ends, and I just didn't necessarily agree with. I'll just leave it at not necessarily resonating with the story that they decided to go with. But the actors were tremendous. The music was great. The look of it was fantastic. I really, you know, it's like they had this amazing play set, and the game they decided to play with it, I don't think was ultimately very satisfying.
And high production values.
Yeah.
And I do like that we didn't talk about this, but quickly we find out how they had Archie in the beginning of the series, because the police were using Dryberg's design, as he put it. So pretty cool. But yeah, I totally get a C+ from Ben, and I could almost rate it that myself, but I'll stick with my B.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to defend the A a little bit, not that I need to, but just to add a bit, which would be, I think the main reason that I'm willing to give it an A is they were really ballsy about it. Even if the story didn't hit home, which clearly it didn't for you, Benny, for example, and I completely understand where you're coming from, I feel like my lack of respect for the recent Star Wars trilogy not having any balls and the fact that they actually just really swung for the fences on this, it kind of made me stoked that, one, they're able to get funding for something like this, and two, that they're willing to take a swing for the fences. So you take the good cast, the good music and all that, and then you mix in the fact that they're just going to go balls to the wall. Like, it's an A for me. That doesn't mean I think that either of your ratings are inaccurate, but just for me, that's what I think.
No, I think that's a really valid argument, man. You're right. Absolutely right. When you stack the two next to each other, I mean, all we did on the Rise of Papa Palpatine episode was complain about how, they're not doing anything bold and they're not creating any great new lore. So, yeah, from that respect, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and similar to that, when we talked about it, Ben, you mentioned when you swing for the fences, you're going to miss a lot of the time. And so, that also backs up your view on this one.
Sure. I mean, I suppose I respect the balls. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it was the right call.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of I'll just reiterate again on the Hooded Justice thing. There's a lot of balls going on there too.
Yep.
With what they decided to do there. And I think that was, like source elevating, whereas I don't know if the main arc was elevating. I don't think it was.
That's fair.
It's kind of like, my criticism of what Manhattan is like is almost kind of like a lot of people's criticism of what Luke Skywalker was like in the sequels. A lot of people complain that they didn't think that that's what Luke Skywalker would be like. And that's kind of how I feel about the Manhattan thing.
Including Mark Hamill.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just I think it's totally worth seeing, by the way. And I think I said at the beginning that I'm not trying to shit all over this. It's just that I do have some gripes about it. And, go out and watch it by all means, because it is good and it is interesting. But I just, it's almost like I discovered a reverence that I had for the source material that I wasn't necessarily aware of beforehand.
Yeah. Clearly.
So that's it.
I love that we end up in different places a lot of the time. I think it makes for a good conversation. So
absolutely, man, great conversation.
Yeah, sometimes it's a circle jerk, and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, sometimes it's right. You said it there, Hegro. Jar Higo. I wonder if he means old Ben Higo.
I like it.
That wizard's just a crazy old man.
Oh, that wizard's just a crazy old man.
How long have you been holding on to that one, dude? That's genius.
That is genius. And I just came up with that this morning. I was like, why did I not see this before?
That's so good.
Jar Higo. Huh. I wonder if he's talking about old Ben Higo. Good times. So there you have it, folks. That was our conversation on the second half of the Watchmen series. We hope you enjoyed it. Absolutely go out and watch the series. Algorithm, what is on deck for us next? I'm excited.
I am too, and I'm buying time because I don't remember.
It's okay.
I'm pretty sure it is The Mandalorian.
Ooh, nice. Yes. Now there's some nice lore that I'll really be interested in watching the rest of, talking about that.
Some nice lore that you'll be interested in trailing off with because your thought caused you to die late in the episode.
That's right, folks. It was a late episode perishing.
I don't know. I think you're the only one that died in that episode too, man. We really need to start dying some more.
I know. I was the only one that did die in this. You know what the problem is we're too nice sometimes.
Yeah, maybe.
No, that is exactly what it is. So there you have it, folks. One death only this time, and mine was right there, talking about The Mandalorian.
Trying to talk about The Mandalorian.
Trying to pretend like I sound like I know what I'm talking about.
So, conclusion of The Mandalorian Season 1 next week, everybody.
Sounds good. For all of us here at the EBD, to all of you, again, a happy holiday season, and thanks for tuning in with us this week. So long.
Thanks, dudes.
Latris.
On the
Menjay?
Menjay. Latris on the Menjay.
Why are we whispering?
And that's going to wrap up this week's episode, folks. Next week, we're going to be talking about The Mandalorian Season 1, Part 2. You can find the show notes for today's episode in your podcast app of choice or at our website, ebd.fm/episodes/36. You can shoot us questions using the Twitter hashtag AskEBD. You can find me at Moverine on Twitter, that's MOHLVERINE. Chad is at Chad Normal on Twitter. Ben is at Jarhigo on Twitter, that's JARHEEGO. I'd like to take a minute now and thank everybody so much for tuning into the show. It means so much to me and the boys. And if you'd like to support the show, there are two great ways you can do it. First, by rating and reviewing us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast Christmas cookies. You can also tell someone to check out the show. Word of mouth is incredibly powerful and incredibly effective. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time, folks. Jarhigo, huh? I wonder if he's talking about old Ben Higo.